Kaya, Kaya Wandu. Hello and welcome. My name is Simon Forrest Burungu. I'm a Wajak Paladong Nyungar with keen connections to the Yamatji and Wongai people. I am of this land and place. I follow a bloodline of people who have walked and cared for this land for over 40,000 years. This is a welcome to country, a welcome to Wajak Nyungar Buja. A welcome to country recognises and acknowledges us, the first and continuing custodians of this land, Australia. Nidya Polo, Nidya Kunkunga, Nidya Margara, Nidya Mindara, Kaya, Kaya Wandu, 912, Simon Forrest Burungu, Kaya Wandu, Nidya Wajak Nyungar Puja, Nal Karich Nyungar Ken Karak Nidya Puja, Nal Karich Nyungar Kabali, Warren Corey.
Okay, Kaya and Nankwell Jayde Conway, Wajak Baladong Nyungar woman also, with connections to Banjima, Badimaya and Banjima people. Who did I say first? Yeah, so I'm, Badimaya, Banjima and Wongai peoples. So all four of my grandparents are from a different language group. So I'm lucky to be connected to all parts of, or the bottom half of Western Australia, basically. I acknowledge that we are on the land of Wajak Nyungar people, and the continuing connection and things to songlines and stories, because I believe that's the whole being and essence of our teaching practices and knowledge sharing. I also acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia, and I acknowledge Wajak so people, non-Aboriginal people living on Wajak country, and the contribution that's made in the space of reconciliation and truth telling, because, you know, without your help and work, it's pretty much a longer journey, I think. So all of us walking and working together helps to, I guess, strengthen that journey of reconciliation. Usually, and I'll talk a little bit, I guess, about an acknowledgement and a welcome. So the video that you saw was a welcome to country by a senior, well, he's considered an elder within the community. Simon has knowledge around stories, where families fit, lots of connections around Wajak country. So therefore, within our community, he's seen as an elder and someone who can do a welcome and welcome visitors and people to Wajak country. Elijah, who is my colleague, he will introduce himself a bit later. He's also quite a, I don't know, were you considered a senior knowledge holder or just a knowledge holder? Yeah. So Elijah has quite a lot of knowledge as well around stories, family connections to places within Wajak Nyungar country. And at times he has the responsibility and right from his elders and his family to be able to deliver a welcome to country as well. But he could talk a little bit about his reasoning around when he chooses a welcome or acknowledgement. Within Nyungar country, women are considered the Bridiers or the bosses. So it would be appropriate for me to introduce either, say, Uncle Simon or Elijah in the sense of a welcome. Even though, and we'll talk about this a bit later as well, but even though there's that sort of balance, I guess, within society where everybody's job works together, women are still seen as providing that leadership and guidance, even though there are senior people. So normally it is very appropriate and should be done this way, where a Nyungar woman would introduce the other people. Yeah, so I'll hand you over to Elijah.
Hiya, thanks for that introduction, Jane. Nanquel Elisha Jacobs. My name is Elisha Jacobs. I'm a Wajak, Baladong, Wilman, Menang and Goreng Nyungar man through my mother's side. I was born here on Wajak country, and I spent most of my life growing up between Wajak country here in Perth and Binjarab country in Mandurah. So a lot of the knowledge that I have came from those two locations, and a lot of special people in my life that have imparted information onto me. Like what Jade said, you know, it is a part of her role as that female to introduce me, because we're standing here on Wajak Budja, the land, our mother country. So the Budja, our land, is one of our mothers in our Nyungar way, and we inherit all of our bloodline and our way of being through our mothers. So that's where that responsibility and that authority comes from. I guess talking back about the welcome and the acknowledgement, I said to Jay today, I want you to do an acknowledgement because sometimes I will do a welcome. A lot of my knowledge that I have has been imparted on me by my grandfather. His name was Cedric Jacobs. He's no longer with us, but he was a senior Wajak elder, and I grew up alongside him, walking around all around Perth, all around Wajak country, and hearing the stories, hearing his personal stories and the ancient ones as well. Before he passed away, he told me and my siblings and our cousins that he wants us to continue his story. So we've all got a little bit of different stories that interlink together from his life. And with that comes our responsibility. So he said, I want you to do a welcome, which is great, but I know culturally that I've got levels of responsibility. So I will only ever do a welcome to country for just a small group. Usually the small groups that we do here on Curtin campus when we run cultural training. And I will never do the welcome if they're the more senior Wajak person in the audience. What I would do is always invite them to do that welcome, or I'll opt to do an acknowledgement, because that would be me overstepping my responsibility. So that's just my level there. So very important. Yeah.
So part of, as you can see there, it says introduction. So part of setting up, usually yarning circles are quite personal, I guess, or can be quite, it can evoke quite a few emotions. So we need to sort of set up a space that is safe. So part of the introduction process, so both Elijah and I said who we are and where we come from, basically, because within Aboriginal society, that's what's important, about who you are and where you come from. Neither of us said what we do. That's kind of secondary, but what we will do for the purpose of the introduction is to go around the circle. Now, a yarning circle is a teaching practice. A lot of knowledge is shared within a circle. It's about respect, being able to engage and see each other, everybody having the same level, I guess, of responsibility and engagement within this session. It's a safe space. You have the right to pass at any time. For the purpose of today, it's going to kind of be, I know it feels a little bit like we're almost talking at you rather than around with you, but we'll open it up a little bit different today, where it'll be about the two-way conversation, right? Because normally it'll go around and one person at a time will speak, but we'll actually, you can ask us to respond to your comments, your questions, your whatever it is that we're talking about. So for the purpose of today, while you will have your time to be the speaker, you have the right to ask us to respond, which will help that two-way conversation. Normally we just get you to have your say and then we just talk, but it is about us guiding, I guess, this this yarning circle, and it is very much we go in a clockwise direction, and it is something that tends to happen quite naturally almost. So I think for this first part of the yarning circle, where we'll spend time talking, we'll get you to introduce yourselves. I'll start again, and I'll just share some other information, because it's up to you how much information you share. And even if you're not comfortable telling us that information, you can make it up for the purpose of this activity, I suppose you could say, or a different way of introducing yourself, because it's not always it's not a common practice that you would go up to someone and say, oh, you know, my name's Jade, and this is where I'm from. And, you know, it is usually about, oh, you know, I'm Jade Conway, I'm studying at Curtin University, or, you know, that's usually how we introduce ourselves. So only share what you feel comfortable with, because that's what we expect. So Nyungar Jade Conway, as I mentioned, Whadjuk Nyungar woman with connections across Western Australia. I am the eldest of 4 children in my family. I have a 21-year-old son who is saying the right things at the moment. He says he's looking to move out, but I think he's just saying that so I'm getting a bit of, you know, oh yeah. But he's very comfortable living at home, I think. I have 4 stepchildren, and they all have children, so I've got 6 grandchildren. And I just had, well, I've spent a lot of time with one of them over the last week or so, and yeah, that's been really nice. I'm a primary school teacher by trade, and I taught in Geraldton and Kalgoorlie for about 13, 14 years, and been at Curtin now for a little while doing cultural education and knowledge sharing. So yeah, that's me. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Kaya, my name's Jamie. I've been a staff at Curtin for coming to 13, 14 years now. Prior to coming to Curtin and had a career here, I'm from Singapore, so I've got family in Singapore. My husband and I both met as international students here almost 2 decades ago, yeah, here in Perth. I've got 2 children. The elder is only 10, and I've got an 8-year-old. A little bit of a handful at this stage, yeah, with 2 of them being in primary school. And I'm also the elder of 2 kids, so I've got a younger brother who lives in Singapore. My ancestry from my mother's side, they migrated or came down from Malaysia into Singapore and settled there in their early years. So we're a very multicultural family, speak a variety of languages at home. Some dialects also that are in the most Chinese type dialects. From my dad's side, we've got ancestry all the way to parts of China. So I think my grandmother was from Shanghai from my dad's side. She's the only member of the family who could speak Shanghainese. None of her kids, she had 13 children.
Oh, wow.
None of the 13 could speak Shanghainese. So we all, growing up, we was English all the way, so we never had dialects to our grandparents, so we never had other languages by way of, you know, growing up. And communication was a bit of a mixed bag, because it was, depending on who we're speaking to, it could be a mixture of Mandarin dialects or English. Oh, wow. So yeah, we've settled in Perth for some time now, so we really are, I'm particularly interested in the Aboriginal culture and the Nyungar culture of the first peoples that were here before, and I've done a few inductions with regards to the walking tours, part of a yarning circle outdoors as well, and Wajima, which would be the next one for me. So wow. Very excited. Yeah. Thanks.
Kaya, I'm Beck. I'm the oldest of 2 kids, so my little sister is 17 and I'm 21, so we don't get along all the time. My dad, I think his parents originally were from Calabria in Italy, and they migrated here, I'm not sure when, and mum's from Singapore as well. She's Chinese Malaysian. I think her parents are also Chinese Malaysian, but I'm not quite sure where ancestry goes in either direction. I'm studying engineering at in Kalgoorlie at the School of Mines at the moment. Just in my 3rd year, so I finish at the end of next year. Yeah, I definitely know I have a lot to learn about Nyungar culture, so I guess that's why I'm here, just to learn a bit more and to be able to share that with others as well, so they can learn as well.
My name's Bree, and I've lived in Perth my whole life. My family's from Scandinavia, but yeah, they've been in Australia for a few generations now. I've got one older brother, and I'm studying construction management. I finish at the end of next year as well, and it's been good being able to learn about the Nyungar culture, and I'm interested to hear some more today.
Right, yeah. All right. Well, my name is Elisha, like I said before. I guess, I spoke a little bit about myself before, where I grew up, and part of my heritage. On my dad's side, I spoke about my mum's side. On my dad's side, he is, I guess, non-Indigenous Australian, and his family go right back to all around Europe, really. We're really multicultural. I think our biggest sort of side is English, Irish side on my dad's side. I guess, I have a background in cultural land management, and I also used to be a hairdresser, so I've sort of gone moving through all these different careers, which is a bit weird now. I'm an educator, but I was always all those things. And I think it's a real reflection on the way that we as Aboriginal people, we're not just doing one thing. We spread out over so many different fields because we've got a lot of work that we have to do. So that's a little bit about me.
So another part of doing introductions that way is, as I mentioned, this is quite intimate and we're getting quite close and personal. The reason is some of the things, not so much today, but sometimes the yarning circle can be quite can have confronting topics and things that really challenge people. So it's about being able to make connections, I suppose, with the people in the group. So anything in our introduction, so you were able to make a connection of sorts that your parents are from the same sort of lineage. So that would be something that you could have a yarn about, or to build a relationship in quite a really short and quick space of time. You're both quite young, and I could almost connect in the way that, the age of my son and things like that, and thinking, well, you both look like you live out of home, so how did you get out of home, and what can I do to help my son move? That would be able to build relationships that way. Knowing that you study in Kalgoorlie, I've got family on my mum's side that are still living in Kalgoorlie. My mum and dad are in Kalgoorlie, and so there's lots of things that we could connect about and build a relationship and feel comfortable to be able to talk about whatever topic the yarning circle brings about. So that's why the introductions are quite important, because sometimes you might not have a lot of time to build relationship, particularly in mining or constructing. If you need to have a yarn with Aboriginal people, you've got to be able to make some kind of connection. Otherwise, conversations are almost not worth it if you're not having that personal connection and being able to build quite positive and mutual relationships, because a lot of our teaching and our ways are about reciprocity and that two-way learning and knowledge sharing. So so if we move on to that.
My job is, that's too far. There we go.
So we talked a little bit already about the yarning circle. So I might open it up now to a bit of a two-way discussion in that, are there any questions or comments or experiences that you've had within a yarning circle? And it may even be, a yarning circle isn't something that just belongs to Aboriginal people. Many cultures across the world have a yarning circle, or people just naturally sit around something, whether it's a round table or a fire or a picnic blanket or whatever. So I think like I said, we need to mention that it's not just a practice that belongs to us. It's something that happens across the world. So I think we might just open it up a little bit to maybe an experience that you've had in a yarning circle, and we'll do it that way again. And if you've got nothing to ask or anything to share, you have the right to pass. So we'll start with you, Jamie, if there's any questions or comment about a yarning circle.
I think one of the questions I had you partially answered, Jade, is whether there is a certain format to a yarning circle and a certain formal proceeding. Does someone have to say something at the start for that to count as a yarning circle? So what I'm getting a sense of is that a yarning circle can be quite informal. It can be just a group of mates sitting around and having a chat to one another. So I guess my question is, what does anything have to happen for it to become a yarning circle, or do just people gathering and having a chat to one another on a certain topic, does that also count as a yarning circle? And I have been part of that yarning circle as part of a walking tour here on campus. So at the end, where everyone sat down in a circle and shared where they were from and how the course had impacted them, that was quite meaningful to me. And then the reflection piece after, that we all get to write down what our thoughts were, that was also, again, very impactful for me. So I think that was mainly where the question is, how or what constitutes a yarning circle?
So there would definitely be a leader or a facilitator of sorts. Elijah's got a tool there which he'll talk about a little bit after, but it is if he was showing or continuing that knowledge on with other people, he would be the leader, and so that yarning circle would have a definite purpose and would be quite almost formal, because everybody would be able to see him and what he's doing. I guess we have our board meetings and things like that that often are in a circle, and you have the head of the table and things like that. So it can be very, very formal, just with a different name, I guess, attached to it. But I think the real explanation of a yarning circle is that everybody is equal. If we do use that sense of a board meeting, there's always a director or a head, or there's always somebody. Like, you don't feel equal with everybody in that room sometimes in the meetings that we have, but in a yarning circle, it is definitely about everybody being on the same level, whether they're an elder, a baby, or a young person, or whatever. It's everybody is equal in that space at the time, and has an equal voice, whether whether people agree or not. Everybody is very much equal. I think and it's quite a respectful space, I guess. So yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah. You got any more to add to that or not?
Yeah, I suppose I do. Yeah, I guess, the yarning circle is our ancient. Jade talked a little bit about it, but, when we think about why we need the yarning circle, it's to talk about things that need doing. If there's something wrong, we've got to get together and all talk about it. So everybody that's there present, you're there for a reason. So it's an opportunity to have a say. Quite often, the way that we actually moved across country in the 6 seasonal rotations, when we got to an area where we were linking with another group of people, there would always be a circular shape present at that location. That's the place for the yarning circle. So it's an opportunity for you to share how you're feeling. If there's something that happened to you in the last so many times that you want to share, tell someone, continue a knowledge system, whatever. There's definitely protocols in place, and there would usually be someone that I suppose will instigate and say, we're doing a yarning circle now. But in our way, when we get together, we naturally just get together in a circular shape, and then that's what happens. Which is what happened at Now and Up. When we went down with the students. We took them to Bremer Bay. Sorry, you missed out on it. It turned out to be a really good day. The river mouth broke through to the ocean. So where we normally would park the bus was full of water, and we crossed it. Yeah. But it was very nice. So we went to Bremer Bay one day, and the students got to go to the shop and get an ice cream or whatever, and we're waiting for the bus to be filled up. And Elijah and I looked over, and they had naturally just created this circle and were yarning, and it was really, it was really good to see, because it's something that happened quite a lot. It's one of the main teaching practices down there. Lots of always sitting in a circle, always sharing that knowledge that way. It can be. I guess it just happens sometimes. Like Elijah mentioned. But comments, questions.
I guess I was also interested as well. also interested as well, like to ask if it happens in an informal as well as a formal space, but I think you definitely answered that. I think the only yarning circle I've been part of other than this one was the walking tour I went on last week with Elijah, and I thought it was really nice because he mentioned on the day as well that like after he spent 2 hours sort of telling us and sharing with us, it was almost like you said, the reciprocative nature of everything in Nyungar culture is that we got to sort of give a little bit back and try and share how he made us feel over that 2 hours. Just try and give some of that warmth back, which I thought was really nice, and that's fun for me. Yeah.
It's great sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's all pretty much been covered. I've been a part of a few yarning circles now, and yeah, one of the best things that I like is the fact that everyone's on the same level. There's no one standing up lecturing kind of thing, or rather than lecturing, it's more of sharing, and everyone's listening, no head of the table, as you were saying before, and that's definitely, I enjoy that. Yeah.
Do you want to go to the next bit?
Next slide. See if I can do it. Yeah. Too good.
So yeah, I know for some of you that may have been on the Wonju Curtin Maya, have you been past the?
Not for a while.
All right. Did you want to talk about this a bit?
Yeah. Ready for me to go now?
Yep.
Okay. So this here is the married tree. So a lot of our experience that we do, and I guess when we do the Wonju Curtin Maya experience, which you both came on, and so did you as well, it changes throughout the season. So we tend to start to go into different locations that are more available, that have things that we can look at, and it naturally flows because our culture, Nyungar culture, is fluid and it changes with the seasons. But there's a particular location where this married tree is. I don't know if you know a married tree. It's not an eucalyptus. It's a totally different type. I won't go into detail, but it's called married in Nyungar. That's all we know. It's been that name for thousands of years. But the sap that actually comes out of the tree there is one of our strongest medicines here on Nyungar country. Very powerful. You can see in this picture here that it looks really runny. When it's like that, you just scoop it off and you can just put it on a fresh cut or a burn, and it just adds like a band-aid. When you put it on your skin, it numbs, so it actually takes all the stinging off. And it's also antiseptic, so it kills the bacteria, but it takes all the burning, stinging pain off there. So it's very special. We use that on the outside of your skin. You can also put it, if you've got a sore tooth, you just put that straight on your sore tooth. So it's very special. If you've got a sore mouth, you just make a little gargle out of it. It's really good. And you can even put a little bit in tea. Because if you've got a sore stomach, an upset stomach, because of that numbing and that bacteria killing properties, it kills that stomach bug and helps your stomach to really calm down. There's a rule about it, so there's always a rule. You can't just go and get everything and free for all. There's always a way that you've got to prepare it. So Nyungars would always say, the size of your thumbnail, if everyone can see it on the camera, size of your thumbnail, that is how much you can ingest. That's it. So if you've only got a little thumb, a little bit. If you've got a bigger thumb, a little bit more. Not an acrylic nail, very different. But that's how much. You mix it with hot water and a tea and you drink it down. Doesn't taste very nice, but it will sort you out because it's very important medicine. Yeah.
And just as Elijah mentioned, usually if the tree looks like that, that's a good time to scoop off and get, because it's naturally being provided to you. It's you don't have to go and smash out the tree to get it out. That's what the environment, that's what Buja is giving to you. So that's what you can access and use, because it's not about, like I said, it's not about going to chop it down to get the gum or the medicine out. It's about what's being provided for you and being able to get that out. So yeah, same sort of process. If you've got any questions about that, we can go around. Otherwise, if there's no questions, we can go through some of the other plants and maybe, actually, I think we'll do that. We'll go through some of the other plants and then we'll ask the questions after that, if you've got any. And so a way that you can identify a married tree will be the honky nuts. When they're on, they come from a marri tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big nuts.
Mm.
Yeah. And they're
Which can also be, oh, you go.
one of the main food sources for cockatoos.
Mm.
So really important.
Mm.
And these trees, generally, they take maybe about 20 years to start producing seed growing from seed. And it's like 80 years in the tree's growth to start producing really small hollows, enough for tiny little birds, and well over 100 years to produce hollows enough for possums and cockatoos, and then way older. So when you're looking at a tree like this, we're just looking at the base of it. It looks quite small in the scheme of things, so we just got it close up. But that tree itself is quite old, so not a home yet, but it is definitely medicine.
May I ask a question before we move past this? How do the early people store these medications? Like, can you keep these medications? Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming you may not get the set that comes through all seasons. So how do they keep it for use? Yeah.
Well, I guess, from what I've learned from Eliza and stuff, is that if you got it off that, like how it is, and kept it, it's easily heated up to become runny. I guess when it's dry, it can be ground. So it's definitely keepable, or storable, I guess. And I think it would just be like in containers, like the Coolamans, whether they're big or small, you have little bowls to keep them in, because it's once you collect them, they are pretty sustainable, I think. Is that?
Yeah, that's very true. When it dries, it goes really crystallized, and in that form, you can just keep a big lump of it.
Yeah.
So funny, you had some in your bag.
Yeah, I did. From that tree, actually, I put some in my bag, and because we'd been walking around and it was starting to be a bit sticky, so I put it in my bag, and then I forgot about it because I didn't wrap it or anything. And then I'd got something out of my bag, and I was, sitting, and I was like, what is this? And it was the gum that had crystallized and gone so fine that it was like I had glitter all over me, and it was like, yeah. Yeah, and it was all the, yeah.
So it's really special, but you'll find that this tree, the marri tree, it grows all over Nyungar country. So, here in southwest on Nyungar Budja, we've got so many resources. So we would sometimes carry a big bit. If you could get a big dried up lump, that would be perfect. But it's quite often that everywhere you went, this tree would be. So you always have that accessibility. Yeah. Next one.
Yeah. Yeah, go on.
Okay. All right. So this one here is the Zamia palm we call Jiraji. Can you say that? Jiraji. And basically, it's very important. This particular plant, Jiraji, it provided a nut, which was one of our staple food sources, our main food sources for thousands of years. We used to eat the nut, which is called bayu. Can you say that? Bayu, yeah, super. And very different name to the plant because they've got different uses. But the nut is poisonous. Yeah, so a big story there. Did you want to tell any of that?
So there are, I guess we'll talk about, there's some colonial records that indicate that colonisers, when they came and they ate these berries because they hadn't had conversations with people around, they just ate the berries and were like, oh no, our men have died, like what's going on? The natives must have much stronger gut systems or something, our men are very sick or some have died. And it's because a lot of this, while there couldn't have been conversations as such, there's body languages, there's symbols, and there's ways around communicating. And it was a simple thing, I guess, and Elijah will talk a little bit later about seasons, but around the things that happen. And part of that use of the nut was around soaking it in running water so that the water would drain out all the toxins. So then the berry or the nut would be edible and not poisonous. So there's a whole big process around that collection, that washing, then the cooking or the grounding or whatever was done with the berry. And it was just around the lack of communication around being able to explain what to do with this food source. Now, on the Curtin campus, you'll see a lot of them. and it's part of a songline, I guess, and a songline is a track or a path that has been continuously walked and followed and had a purpose and been, as it's teaching, it's been sung or danced while the track or the action's been happening. So this area here in Curtin, and there's a whole big story around it and where that path goes to, but it is here on Curtin campus. It is about, I think, is that the one that starts at Curtin or is that the Dolphin one at Cas? Okay, so yeah, this one I guess is just about highlighting the fact that this area that we're on was quite a rich area in this resource, and people would often travel here to collect that source of food. Yeah. So
I think like Jay talked a little bit about the preparation of the nut. So there's a lot of different stories, and a lot of different Nyungar families have a slightly different section of the story. But it was a practice that, you know, it sustained us for tens of thousands of years, but it was stamped out really early on in colonisation. And I think it's to do with this real fear of this poisonous plant and not understanding that if you follow these steps and procedures that were put in place, you can actually eat this, and it provides so much food that it can sustain so many people. Really special. There's been a lot of conversation saying, you know, because that songline, which is the knowledge flow of knowledge across the landscape of this Jayde that comes here, one day we might, you know, Nyungar scientists and Western scientists might work together, and we'll get that. We'll reincorporate that knowledge system. We'll get it in bullies. What we actually used to make out of the nut, it's like a big nut. If you've seen them in the bush, about that big nut. So don't get them and try and eat them when you've prepared it. Basically, they would be, soaked through that water to take the poison off, and then they'd be dried and roasted in the fire. And then that roasting, again, I was always told that takes a little bit extra poison out of it. So it's a part of the steps of the process. Then they'd be ground down into a very fine powder, which was flour, and they were baked into bread, into what we call today damper. So a variation of what damper used to be. Aboriginal people in Australia are known as the oldest bread makers in the entire world. So the practice of this is very old. And I would suspect that if we were to taste that flour today, oh, wow, well, you would have never tasted anything like it in your life, because there isn't anything like this available for us to actually access. So I think it'll be very delicious, its own flavour, and I think it'll be pretty special. Yeah, the Jayde. Really cool. Any questions about it before we move on? All right, next one.
Gosh, there's lots of plants, isn't there? You would have heard, did you talk about this on your walk?
Yes, always do.
Yep, so everyone said, so we could probably just skip past that one.
Oh, okay. No one want to talk about it?
Oh, well, after we get to the next one, then we'll ask questions. Again, with the Balga bush, you would have heard stuff about that on the walk, yeah?
No, I'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes, yeah, you talk about it.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
The boss here, the Brittier. Like, please let me talk about it. No. So the Balga tree, a lot of people call them grass trees, a xanthoria. There's a few other different names which I suppose, you know, we don't use anymore. But we, the Nyungar people, we never use those names because we've been calling it Balga, which is the Nyungar name, for thousands of years. So that's the name, Balga. We use the Balga for a lot of different things. We use the leaves to actually create the thatching in our mai sometimes, if it's the particular season that's what you use. But we make actually a mat out of the leaves, and they interlink together. We put them around the outside on the floor of the mai. Mai is like our huts that we used to build and live in, for everybody that doesn't know. And it is said that the reason that we would do that is because if a snake was coming slithering across and it went to go over those Balga leaves, they don't like the feeling on their stomach. So not to say that they won't go over it, but if you're going in a nice, smooth, soft sand, and then you go to that, you'll just naturally follow the smoother course. So that snake will turn away. And so that's a part of that old knotted system. So we don't break the leaves off unless we're going to use it for that, because that's how the plant absorbs light. Yeah. The base, on the base there'll be sap coming out. The sap we actually use to make tools. So you brought this one here. So this one's called a codge. Can you say that? Codge. Yeah. Codge. Yeah. You can say it like that. Codge. And so that's a very particular word. It's like an axe, so you can see it's like an axe.
Do you want to let them hold it?
Yeah, hold it. Oh, there you go. Oh, there you go. Pass it around. So we actually use, to make the resin for that, we use 3 different materials. One is obviously the sap from the balga. You crush it all up into a fine powder, and then we can melt it, and then it resets back into a solid. So now you can put it on a stick. But if you just use it like that, it's not strong enough, and it will just break. And quite often, even if it just gets rapidly cooled in the knife, it'll shatter. So we know that we've got to mix in a couple more things. So we use the cob, which is the black charcoal from the fire. We crush that up and mix it in. What that does, those 2 things together, you can melt them down and use that. It sets the resin really hard. So if you're making something like a knife or something you're going to cut with that you're not going to hit anything with, you can use those 2. But if you want to make a codge, you've got to use another material. You should know because I put you on the thing already. What is it? It's from a kangaroo. I always feel embarrassed when anyone say that. It sounds gross. It's a kangaroo poo. We say the Nyungar, but it sounds gross, but it's really not, because a kangaroo, all it eats is fresh grass. The fresh grass is brought down after it's chewed all up into small bits, and then the stomach digests it and chews it up more, in the belly, and then when it comes out the other end, and then it dries, it's just a little pile of crushed up grass. And that creates a fibre. So we've mixed the fibre in with the other 2, the cob and the balga resin, and melt that up. And so what that actually does is it makes it flexible. So fibre, when you mix it into a resin or a glue, makes it flexible. So if you actually hit something, it's not going to break, or the chances of it breaking are much less. So that's a very old science, working out what you want to use and make it for that.
I just think about when I dropped that and it broke.
Oh, well, there wasn't this one.
Oh, wasn't that?
Another one. I didn't put much Nyungar in it, and Jay dropped it on the floor. And it broke. And I said, "Oh, why'd you break my thing? How rude!" And I said, "No, don't worry, because I'll just remelt it and do it again." So all I did was I just took that bit off, re-crushed up that section, and then heated it up and started to remelt it, and it was good as new. This one's got a lot more gunner in it, so it probably won't break if you drop it. And that's lessons learned, really. I suppose when you're making things for display, we don't have to make them exactly the same as they would be if you were going to hit something. And really, that's how it works. So those are decisions that you make. And I think Jayde made a comment to me the other day about sort of talking about tool making and cultural tool making. A lot of people say it's, what did you say it was? Making.
Oh, like replicas.
Replicas, yeah. And so I'm like, what's that? Because it's not a replica. It's a continuation of making that thing. It's a continuation of culture. It's the same way that we make it. A little bit different because it's for display, but you could hit something to more break it up if you wanted. So really special.
And I think.
What is that?
Oh.
Is that a tool?
Yeah, it's an axe, a codge. Okay. Yeah, so a little axe, and you would use it to, you wouldn't chop a tree down. We didn't chop trees down because naturally they'll drop branches on their own, and that's when we get them. But if you had a nut, like a Kwandong nut, we'll crush those up like that.
Oh, yeah. I got some. Yeah.
Or you might use a little limb, chop it up, and you feel that this one's actually quite sharp, but naturally you would have sharpened it more before you put it on. Yeah. Yeah.
I got some earrings out of the Kwandong nuts, or some Kwandong nuts. Yeah. when we got back to the camp, we brought it up at the yarning circle, and straight away Uncle Eugene and Uncle Simon busted us because they were like, they knew exactly where we got them from and where we pulled up, and they were like, we were writing those off, we were, well, they're in the car.
Yeah, that's very funny because we didn't say where it was. We said on the way, we've seen some quandongs and we stopped and we picked them, and it was so nice. We gave you a quandong and we got to experience it. They said, were those the quandongs at Nyungar? And we were like, yes. And every Nyungar in the southwest has been watching those quandongs at Nyungar. So
And we stole
took them. So we were in trouble. How funny.
We a bit of context, Jamie, Brianne and Rebecca were part of the cohort of students for the Now and Up trip. For different reasons, both were offered an alternative program, but we had to, Bree came for 1 or 2 days and then we had to bring her back, or halfway. And yeah, we found these quandongs and she's in the back in pain and he's like all over, oh, there's a quandong. So we just pulled up and grabbed these quandongs and she's in the car with her leg up and everything. But yeah, it was, and then we got in trouble when we got back because Uncle Eugene and Uncle Simon knew exactly where we'd been and they'd been eyeing them off. But yeah.
Quandongs are like, just for anybody that might be watching this, they're like, I call them like a native peach. Not really, they're a quandong. That's the new name. But, talking about what they seem like, a native peach. And they taste really sort of sour and they're fluorescent red like Christmas baubles hanging on the tree. So when you see them growing on the side of the road, it's very exciting. And we'll run out of the car. And so they've got a really thin outer skin and this nice nut, which is like a bit lumpy like a brain. And you can smash that open, which is what you use this for. Hit it open, and on the inside there's I guess a nut, and it tastes delicious. A little bit between a macadamia and a sandalwood nut, so it's really special. So that's a part of that, the Kambarang season that we're in as well. They start fruiting, the fruit ripens at the beginning of Kambarang. So that's a part of this particular season that we're in. Yeah.
Are there any more plants on there?
Okay.
No,
Should have put quandongs in.
Oh no, go back because we'll talk about the season.
Oh, where's the thing?
So yeah, just about the plants and stuff that we've talked about is that we'll start with you, Jamie. Are there any questions or comments or anything you'd like to share with us?
I suppose I've learned so much about the plants and the seasons. I wondered if back in the day it was easy to find these plants in all parts of, Western Australia, and did communities tend to live in those areas that these plants grew? Because obviously they lived a lot from what was available, the natural resource from the ground. So were there intentions to cultivate or plant some of these very important plants to make sure that they were always readily available for communities that lived in those days?
So I'll answer the first part of that in that there's this understanding, I guess, or idea that Aboriginal people were nomadic or wanderers with no sense of purpose. So part of your question is that there was definite purpose, definite living near resources that were available, and I think Elijah can touch on in a second he talked a little bit about Kambarang, but he can talk about the seasons as well. That circular or that movement was all about what the environment was providing, and there were definite spots where you would live and stay at that time of the year with the resources that were made available at that time. And it's, I forgot the last part of your question. Oh, you might be able to answer that bit, I guess. And I think, each season provides a different thing. There were different elements, I guess, of what would happen during that season. So I'll hand it to Elijah and he can. Yeah.
Definitely, and naturally when you think about things and the eating of seeds and different things, a lot of seeds actually only become fertilized or activated when they actually pass through the body of an animal. And so when we think about, in Nyungar in particular seeds like the snotty gobble plant, which is a whole other one, that's got this sort of gooey fruit which stuck on the seed, and you really have to swallow it to actually get that. When it passes through, that's what actually makes the seed active, so then that grows a new plant. So naturally, those particular trees would actually be around campgrounds where people were eating them and then expelling them. So there's different ways like that. When you think about how that works, there's particular yams here on Nyungar country. We say it's warren, and then it's a fertility yam. So our people actually cultivated it in these huge farm areas to produce huge amounts of it. And that was very well documented, coming across kilometre stretches of areas of turned soil with this yam present when the English first came here, and they said, this looks like a great place for a farm. And they made a farm there. And within very little time, cattle had eaten all the yams and all those things, so it all changed. Things like the Jiraji, Jay touched a little bit on the songline, but when we've had conversations with Uncle Noel Knapp, who's a Nyungar elder, it's just amazing. He holds a lot of the stories for the songlines and reads the songlines. He says that the Jiraji songline starts way down in the south coast and then sort of meanders up through Nyungar country, through here, and then it continues all the way to Geraldton. When it gets north of Perth, about Yanchep, and then coming up just before Geraldton, it forms a very thin line because it naturally didn't grow all the way up there. So we say that's the actual travel route of our people when we would go to that area. And Uncle Noel had said that when people were walking, they would have put the seat in there to create that connection and the flow, so it was accessible as we were walking through, but also became a part of the guide across country. So that, in a way, is a form of cultivation. There's a lot of different things about food storage around Western Australia, because you've got to think about how big Western Australia actually is. We've got very dry areas, very wet areas, a lot of different things. So here on Nyungar country is all I can really talk about, that's all I know. We've got a lot more water, we've got a lot more biodiversity, a lot more plant species, and so we didn't really need, I suppose, to store things or to overly cultivate things because everything is there. And the camps, the way that we moved across the country in the seasons, we always camped at the exact same location, and because that location had what you needed for that season at the location. So yeah, really, when you think about it, it's a part of that wider system. Any questions about that?
Well, Rebecca's turn.
I guess I just think it's cool how they just take, the Nyungar people just take what they need and they sort of move on as those things become unavailable, because there are other things that pop up. I think that's kind of cool. It's like you're not always worrying about where the next thing's going to come from. You're sort of just existing in the present, and I think that's really nice.
The main thing that I was thinking was just who was the first person to mix the kangaroo poo and the stuff from the tree, and so I just think it's cool. They just thought of it, tried it, and it's worked, and it's just been passed down.
Yeah.
And just whatever, using the trees for whatever you need. Yeah, I think that's cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, I guess, I don't know. I know the last slide said that, if you keep going.
Okay, we'll keep going.
Yeah. I think it was that, and so I think that's a very, I guess, condensed but informal introduction, I guess, into our way of our society and part of teaching. And I think a lot of what we do physically on country is about engaging all the senses, so getting you to touch, getting you to smell, getting you to feel and listen and see all those things, because that connection to what's around there, I think, has just always been part of our practice. And a lot of the knowledge that Elijah and I have has been passed down, whether it be physically through Elijah with his grandfather, or verbally, I guess, through my family who have shared stories with me, and I think it really is quite amazing to think that First Nations people, you know, in particular Aboriginal people here in Australia, and that first teachers, first engineers, first builders, first artists, first botanists, and all those sorts of things, that is our knowledge that has been passed down, and we have the way of, I think Elijah mentioned it, about scientists and Aboriginal people putting that knowledge together and having something so amazing that for future generations, that whole reciprocity of things will be maintained. And, you know, I mean, how else, you know, 60,000 years of knowledge, you know, we want to continue that. So I guess, yeah, that brings us to the end of the yarning circle. And as it says up there, if you've got any other questions or anything, I guess we'll open it up. Otherwise, we'll say Budawan, which you can. Oh, is there? Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so Rebecca and Bree, I'm not sure if we provided these to you, so you can take a photo of that slide if you want, and I would encourage you to have a look at some of those documentaries or something if you haven't already, and maybe do a journal entry about those if you haven't submitted your journal yet. But yeah.
Wonderful.
So, do you want to talk about Budawan?
Yeah, so did you say that Budawan, Yana?
No, I just said Budawan.
Okay, so we say Budawan, and our border is one different word, and the border is reflecting, you know, sort of going around, because as we spoke about in the circular structure, you know, things continue, they change over time, but they continue. So we say Budawan, we don't say goodbye because we know we're going to come back together again eventually. And then the one, short for wanging, which is the talking. So we're going to talk again in the future. That's what that means. So never goodbye, always see you again in the future.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the end, I guess. No worries.
Very good. Yeah, very useful. And I think on reflection, because the Nyungar culture is a lot about the language. There isn't a written form of recording these events. So I suppose it's always passed down through stories. And that's why the yarning circle is so significant. That's the opportunity to pass down the knowledge and stories.
Yep.
Thank you.
No worries.
All right, thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
Crazy. It must have been strange walking in and going. I just tagged along because I had another thing that got cancelled.
Yeah.
Last minute, so I said, I'll come as well. And then here we are.
Definitely forward that forward by you.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries.